Welcome back, everybody. Just Mike here. We have another clock to work on. Anyway, this here is a Master Crafter's vintage clock. And when you're looking, if you happen to have a clock that kind of looks like this, it might be the Master Crafters, or look under United clocks and you'll see all the vintage clocks that are the small, normally electric clocks. Anyway, this one here is a lantern, and the movement seems a bit loose, and so I started taking it apart, and I thought, well, let's show you what might be the problem. Here's the clock. So this is the clock. I already took the screws out. That does have a little light in here that looks like a flickering fire, and the time did move this far, but this whole thing is loose inside. So far I've taken, this thing only had 4 screws. It's supposed to have more. It's missing 2 of them. This is the wire that goes up to the light. Maybe I'll plug it in and I'll show it to you. So we're going to disconnect these wire nuts so I can get this lid off, and so we can take a look at this movement here. So I disconnected the wire just on the light and pulled this out. This has the 3 screws that goes, or the nuts, bolts, what do you want to call it, to go to the movement to hold it together. And by the looks of it, they just set in them 3 plastic holes. Nothing really bolts this thing in. And this would be a good time to go ahead and clean it's plastic, but clean the globe so that way your clock's back to looking good again. And because I have this out, let me show you inside this movement. So inside here, you can see this has a plastic gear, which is nice, and then the brass. On some of your older ones, you have a fiber gear in here, which is normally this plastic one in here, and usually those things break very easily, so you got to be real careful with them. But because this one's got a plastic gear, it's not a heart attack. If you have the older ones that has the, I'm going to call the fiber gear, I forgot what they call the stuff. It's supposedly pretty strong, but of course in time, I'm sure they get old and break easy. And what the problem is that gear actually needs clock oil to keep it drenched in order to keep the integrity to that gear. If you're doing this, be careful because it is vintage. It's a nice way to get some deep cleaning done if you have this apart. These older clocks more than likely have been sitting around because someone got tired of them, thrown in the garage, whatever, and someone found them and decided to put them up for sale, I guess, because they didn't want them, which is fine. Not everybody is a clock collector, And it is nice to have clocks that are vintage to show what what they had in that era. I think this needs a scrub with some Dawn dishwashing soap and a toothbrush. So this is proving difficult per se. The wire went through this hole here to the back, but it's going to cause the clock to set away from the wall a little bit and slide back and forth. It does have a cutout right here, and so that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the wire just drop straight through like it should. This motor here has another, we'll call it insulator here, where once I put these wires through, I can tie a knot, and that way it's secure and not going to fall or be pulled away from the movement once it's wired in. So now that there can possibly get pulled if you wanted to, and it's not going to hurt anything. So now to try to get these together with this wire here, which is really short, it can be done, but it's going to be a headache. Now to get this gear to stay on, and this shaft here has to fit on that gear down there, and keep the lens in, get these bolts and nuts. It has to sit a certain way in order to hit all three supports in there. We'll set this in later. Main thing is getting this in. This here's got a thread on it or something. It's supposed to actually stay in there. So the little flicker of lights there, obviously you wouldn't see that unless it's a darker room. The only way you can change the time is you actually have to move the minute hand around, because there's nothing on the back to do that. Right there's a model number 137. And it says lantern, and it does say Master Crafters on there too. And with this coming out the bottom, it's much, I think, is much better. Realistically, this is an old cord, and so it's really stiff. So possibly you want to either buy a cord or get an extension cord and cut the end off of it and use that to wire this with and get whatever color you want. I've got two more screws to put back in, but they're a little bit stripped out compared to the size of these, so I'm going to have to search around here, see if I have some screws that's going to work for this. So it's nice to get this clock cleaned up and possibly going again. Like I say, it was running and keeping time, but the movement kept slopping around in there, and that doesn't help the time any. Anyway, we did get it oiled, did clean the outside of the clock, and got the movement back into the little nubs that were on the, let's say, dial, but the back side of the dial, to hold the movement still. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe because it's free. And give me a thumbs up because I'd appreciate that. And until next time, God bless.